Hello and welcome to The One Show with Alex Jones.
And Matt Baker. Now 60 years ago today, Sir Edmund Hillary and Tenzing, Norway reached the top of Mount Everest. And tonight in London, the Queen will be celebrating the anniversary, and so are we.
We are indeed. We're going to be meeting a man who's just come back from a record-setting expedition to the top of Everest. We'll also meet the daughter of the man behind Hillary and Norgay's successful climb and the unsung mountain heroes, of course, the Sherpas.
Yes. And our guest tonight is hoping to do some climbing of her own, straight to the top of the book chart. Sherpa Dave, please bring in the lovely Miss Tess Daly.
Wow! Yes, have a seat. Have a seat. Sherpa Dave.
These heels weren't made for hiking.
Well, you've done well, and nice to see you in snowy white as well.
Yeah, you look lovely.
Yeah.
So
good to see you both.
Yeah, good to see you. We're going to be talking about this novel, your second novel, very shortly. But first, the Strictly News. I mean, there's always seems to be Strictly News. Brucey was on BBC Breakfast the other day, wasn't he? And he's going to be doing fewer shows this year.
Yes,
so
he's confirmed for the series.
Yes.
Oh, good. That's good.
And he's booked himself out 3 weeks off.
Yeah.
And then will you and Claudia do?
Claudia and I will be doing the duties. Yes,
So, I mean, well, you'll be at the helm yet again. So when does Strictly become your show and Brucey becomes a special guest?
That's not going to happen.
You don't think?
Brucey wouldn't stand for it.
Oh, we're glad he's back.
Yeah, absolutely. Love him to bits.
Now, Brucey isn't the only octogenarian. That's the night, the word of the night. Yes, basically, he's nifty on his feet, but he's not the only one. 80-year-old from Japan has just become the oldest person to climb Everest.
Yes, but you don't have to be 80 and on top of the world to impress us. We want your photos of when you conquered your personal Everest. It doesn't have to even be a mountain, does it?
No.
Or a hill, for that matter. It
Tess,
can be anything.
what would yours have been, the last major thing that you overcame?
For me, it's probably my fear of flying.
Oh,
Yeah.
yes.
Oh, I mean, I was fine, then I had children. Suddenly I wasn't fine.
No.
I
Really?
couldn't bear flying. No, it was a real phobia, and it got worse and worse.
They say, don't they, it comes on suddenly.
It's strange, and it got to a stage I sort of dreaded going on holiday, and then dreaded coming back once I was there. You know, the whole.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I saw someone about it actually, and it has helped. I've seen someone a couple of times, and they sort of coax you through your fear.
Yeah.
And so far, 80% better. So almost there.
Good.
Yeah, we have liftoff.
Yeah.
Well, for me, it was saying the word octogenarian.
You got there, though.
Anyway, send us your conquering hero moments to The One Show at bbc.co.uk.
Now, making it to the top of Everest once is impressive enough, although the record is an exhausting 21 summits, and it's held by a Sherpa called APA.
21 times, it is remarkable, isn't it? But Sherpa means far more than being a good climber. Lucy Siegel gets a crash course in their culture from the Sherpas who've set up base camp in Britain.
It's 60 years since Everest was first conquered, and since then there have been thousands of recorded climbs. Almost all of them have had one thing in common: they were accompanied by Sherpas. But what do we really know about Sherpas? Well, surprisingly, there's a small community living right here in the UK. It's a misconception that Sherpas are only hired porters to carry bags. The word Sherpa originally refers to an ethnic group of people from the Himalayas with a population of between 300,000 to 400,000, now scattered across the globe. They have their own language and a strong sense of community and identity. Sherpas were originally high-altitude farmers and traders, but during the 1920s, Westerners began trekking in the region and hiring the Sherpa people as porters because of their skills. Kaji, a policeman, and daughter Ji have never visited Everest, but they want people to recognise the Sherpa culture.
Is it annoying that people always associate Sherpas with mountaineering?
Yes, because the definition is wrong. The definition of porter is who carries. You can have a porter in hospital, you can have a porter in, hotel. So the porters is different. The Sherpa is the people who migrated from east. Those are Sherpa. The Sherpa can do other business like trade or farming.
Like myself, I'm going into dentistry. My brother is graduating as doctor next year, and my dad is a policeman himself. And they're just like any other people, just open, honest, and really humble, I think.
Ang Kulyung Lama was the head of the Sherpa Association here in the UK and is worried the traditions at the heart of Sherpa culture are in danger of being lost.
Sherpas have their own language.
Yeah, Sherpa have one language, one culture, one territories. The identity will carry only by language. The new generation is disappearing and not learning those languages.
Do you feel like you're hanging on to your culture?
Yeah, I personally do. I trying to preserve the culture, tradition of Sherpas as much as I can, but can't give up, so need to keep it up.
Khalsang is a climbing Sherpa from Nepal and almost lost his life when trekking across Everest.
I'm rushing, I'm going to rush and going down. Then we cross the crevice, put ladder on it, and we cross like this. And the problem is I don't have a harness. And a lot of cloud, I couldn't see. Ladder's twisted. Yes, I fell up in crevice. I think I fell up maybe 140-50 feet down. But I'm lucky I'm survived.
Soon after his experience, Khalsang met his wife Susie while trekking in the Himalayas.
This was the mountain where we met, and Khalsang's climbed this mountain many times. It's a very popular trekking peak known as Island Peak. Went to climb mountain, met husband. Khalsang came over the following year to England, and I met him at Heathrow.
Yeah.
And I said to him, "How long have you come for?" And I thought he'd say 2 or 3 weeks. He said 6 months. Anyway, we got married on the last day of the 6th month.
And tell me about all of these. Are these all mountains that you've climbed?
Yeah, all mountain I climbed. This is Everest.
This is Everest.
Top of the Everest, yeah.
That's incredible.
And this is North Yorkshire, Wensleydale.
I love this. This is North Yorkshire.
Yeah.
This is Everest.
Yeah,
These are the 2 parts of Khalsang now. And 2 parts of you
This
as well.
is big, this is small, but it's powerful.
Okay.
Ah, thanks, Lucy. Now with us is Harriet Tuckey, whose father knew how vital Sherpas are to Everest climbers. Harriet, your father, of course, was Dr. Griffith Pugh, good Welsh name there, and he was the expedition's sociologist back in 1953, wasn't he? Physiologist, sorry. What did he tell you, or what did you read in his diaries about the Sherpas then that he met?
Well, one of the things I read was that he very strongly recommended that the Sherpas should be given the same oxygen equipment and the same clothing as the climbers, because he said they were going to face the same challenges, but they would be working considerably harder than the climbers.
Wow. And Tenzing and Norgay, they came round your house, didn't they? I mean, obviously, yes. 6 years old, I guess your memories were a little bit foggy, but what do you remember?
Well, I remember he was very smiley, and he had a wonderful wide smile and lovely white teeth. And I asked him if he'd seen a tiger, and he roared with laughter. And I was a bit perturbed, but I found out later that the reason he probably laughed was because elite Sherpas who climbed to very high altitudes were known as tigers.
So, yeah, he was one.
Yes, yeah. He was one.
He was one of them, yeah.
Tiger itself. He told me he hadn't seen a tiger in the end, but I think that's why he laughed.
But your father's medical work was key to the success of that first mission that reached the summit, wasn't it? I mean,
yes,
what findings then did he bring with him to make it that successful?
He'd done a study the year before on a mountain called Cho-Oyu near Everest, and he recommended that they used oxygen in a different way, in a new way, and that meant the oxygen worked. It had never worked before. Secondly, he told them how to acclimatise. They had to give a month to acclimatisation. They had to climb high in the day, but sleep at a level they could tolerate and go gradually up over a month. And that meant they were much fitter and better acclimatised.
So that's kind of the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. And that's still used today, isn't it, as a technique?
It is. That technique is still used today. But the most important thing was he told them that they'd got to drink 6 to 8 pints of water a day to avoid dehydration.
Right.
And he also told Hillary he might not feel thirsty. So the way to know whether he was properly hydrated was to see how often he urinated. And after he got to the summit, he often used to report that when I got to the summit, I had no choice but to pee on it.
And it's all thanks to your dad.
Yes, that is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Wow.
Well, we can see your dad here. We've got some lovely footage of your dad coming back and you as a little girl running up to meet him. Here it is.
Oh, how lovely.
Colonel Hunt, followed by Tiger Tenzing, leaves the aircraft which brings the triumphant Everest expedition back to Britain. London airport is crowded with hundreds of well-wishers. Mr. Pugh's little daughter rushes to greet her father back from the roof of the world. Eagerly, wives and relatives gather round to welcome the heroes home again.
Is that a very vivid memory of yours? I mean, obviously it looks wonderful there, but for you, as personally?
Well, I remember it was a very exciting day out, and I had a new pink bolero, and I loved it. I found I was the centre of attention. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But what we saw there, you were telling us earlier, was ironic, really, wasn't it?
It was a very ironic image, because there wasn't much hugging between me and my father, and when I grew up, I didn't get on with him at all. Right. I learnt about him through writing my book. And now I feel differently.
Well, and that's the thing, because Harry, you feel like he's kind of been wiped from the history books, really, in that way.
Yes, I do. And I think that the reason is that the leader of the expedition, John Hunt, he wanted to be seen as a gallant and clever leader who had succeeded in bringing the great British quest of climbing Everest to a fruitful conclusion. And the last thing he wanted to admit was that a physiologist had solved the problems of climbing at high altitude, and that was really why he got to the summit. He wanted to be seen as having stood on the shoulders of his predecessors.
Well, the book you've written will help people realise how key he was to the expedition. Everest, the first descent, is out now. Thank you very much, Harriet.
Thank you.
Good luck with it. Now, in the fight against organised crime, the police can spend years travelling the world looking for the one clue that could break a case wide open.
And sometimes they can just sit at their desks and check Facebook. Martin Bayfield meets the detective whose suspects weren't exactly criminal masterminds.
You'd expect most criminal gangs to hide in the shadows, to avoid the limelight. At least that's what you'd expect from criminals with some sense. This is the story of a criminal gang that doesn't score very highly on the intelligence front. And here they are, the Ladbroke Grove Bloods, as they like to be called. Hardly the shy and retiring types. They posted this video bragging of their criminal exploits on YouTube. Whilst you or I might use social networking to share our holiday snaps, they used it to brag about what cars they'd nicked. This is Caelan Williamson posing with his new Range Rover. Nice wheels, except they're not his. The car was stolen just a day before this snap was taken. But that didn't stop Williamson putting the photo on his Facebook profile for the whole world to see. Not a good move, because guess what? The police can use Facebook too. In fact, they often look at the social networks of people known to them, and that included Williamson. His Facebook page was brimming with incriminating photos of him and his mates, posing with flash cars, champagne, expensive watches, and wads of cash. Impressive, considering none of them had a job.
Our first suspect, Caelan Williamson, had basically taken it upon himself to post a photograph on his Facebook page, stood in front of a stolen Range Rover. From the picture we could establish most of the registration, and from that we identified the burglary where that car was stolen. I've never seen such, well, for want of a better word, stupidity.
Detectives then seized Williamson's mobile phone. It too was a treasure trove of incriminating evidence.
We found a host of things on Caelan's phone, instant messaging between him and the other gang members that not only showed criminality but also proved association between the group, so quite vital evidence.
The info on the phone linked Williamson to the rest of the gang and a series of burglaries across the swankier parts of West London. When detectives swooped on the other gang members, they seized even more phones, all full of illuminating photos. In fact, these boys just loved posing for the camera. Here's Daniel Talbot with his new Porsche. And here he is again. Nice hairdo, Dan. Rory Mason liked to flash the cash, cunningly posing with it outside his own house. Not very bright. And that's Connor Murphy with a sandwich made of Reddies. Yes, that's right, a cash sandwich. So where did it all come from? You won't be surprised to hear the gang's tactics were pretty simple. They targeted homes with expensive top-of-the-range cars parked outside. They then break into the house, steal the car keys and anything else they could get their hands on, before making their getaway in the stolen car. And if all the evidence in their colourful snaps wasn't enough, they like to film their antics too.
up the engine. Rev up, get the engine go out the window. Yeah, boy.
These videos show some of them racing a Porsche against a BMW.
Big man. Oh yeah. But this is a monster.
The videos were found on the phone of gang member Nye George.
That's what I'm saying, we're getting at least 180 in that one, mate, yo.
Pretty damning stuff. But it wasn't always the gang who were doing the filming.
We've got the vehicle going alongside Droop Street. It's 70 mile an hour, 70 miles an hour.
Detectives linked them to this dramatic high-speed car chase filmed by a police helicopter. The evidence against the gang was overwhelming. There were enough photos and videos to link them to 15 burglaries, although police believe they may have committed more.
They were all local gang members, and I think such was the weight of evidence against them that they were left with no real opportunity, the majority, to plead guilty at court on the first appearance. I've been a detective for many years, and certainly in my experience I've never really come across evidence like it. The level of stupidity really on their part, and the evidence that they left for us to just pick up and use, was incredible. It really was.
8 of the gang were convicted and sentenced to between 3 years and 4 years 8 months in prison. Since they've been locked up, there's been a 48% reduction in burglaries in this area. Now, the only photographs these boastful criminals need to be worried about are their own police mugshots.
48% decrease. That is
half
quite
the amount of crimes
Nearly
down
half,
those guys.
remarkable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's up to you, New York.
It
Tess,
is.
it's your second novel now.
Yes,
so when
it
did
is.
you start getting the writing bug?
Getting the writing bug. Do you know, I actually got into writing before I got into television. I was living in New York, and I was modelling at the time, and I'd been living there for about 5 years.
Right.
And
What sort of things were you writing then? Was it
well, then I was
stories?
doing more interviews with celebrities over there, so I actually made myself a show reel. I produced a show reel, and my first interviewee was Quentin Crisp.
Oh, wow.
The English raconteur.
Straight to the top.
Incredible. He actually lived in my neighbourhood in New York, and you could famously ring him up. He was in the New York phone directory. You could ring him up, take him out, and he would recount his life's adventures. And so I sort of wrote about him, I filmed him, made a little show reel, and that's what got me my first job in television. But yeah, I wrote for a magazine over there, and I've just always enjoyed writing ever since I was a kid. You know, at school, English, wrote a diary from day one. My mum would buy me a diary every year.
Yeah.
She's always written a diary every year. So it's just something I've always enjoyed doing. You know, you get a chance to be creative, really.
And it's probably for you, you know, just as well that you kept a diary, because they say write about what you know. And Holly, the central character in this book, is what happened to you, really, isn't it? Well, it's a girl who worked in customer services, and then she gets scouted by a modelling agency, and then it's her adventures as she travels around the world.
She's scouted. As I was scouted as a model on the streets of Manchester, and she's scouted and she takes part in a reality TV show. It's a show that does finding the UK's next supermodel. So she gets swept up into this world. She then finds herself in New York as a consequence, and it's all about her adventures.
Well, I started reading it this morning, and I've not been able to put it down since.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know, I'll tell you.
Good.
I was amazed because Nigel Havers is also a big fan. He came in the other day and
really?
he was reading it. Look, honestly, here's the proof.
Will you marry me? Muttered Holly, delirious with exhaustion and happiness, as James tucked her in. Then she promptly fell asleep, so speedily that she wasn't sure whether or not she had really heard James whisper, "I would love nothing more."
There we go.
I haven't got to
I'd like to
that
hear the audio.
Well, this is the thing we thought.
Right?
I mean,
Those dulcet tones sounds better than ever.
so you mentioned there that you got scouted.
Yes, I did.
When was that then? And
Oh,
where were you?
when
And
was
are you
it?
still in contact with that person?
Not anymore. I was in Manchester. I was outside McDonald's. My sister was in there, and someone came up with a leaflet from a model agency and said, "Would you like to come join us?"
What was your
I
reaction then? when you
Oh no, I was too shy. I was doing my A-levels at the time. I thought, oh no, can't do that. And then sort of went home, slept on it, and thought, well, I'll just go in and see them. And I did. And then within about 6 weeks, I found myself in Tokyo.
Wow.
And then Barcelona, Madrid, then I lived in Paris for 5 years, back to London, and then lived in New York for another 5 years.
But how was, you know, Tokyo as a 17-year-old? That must have been pretty
It was
scary and
absolutely
eye-opening.
mind-blowing. I'd only ever been to the Isle of Wight on holidays. I mean, I don't think I'd left the country, but Austria for a school skiing trip, and that was it, you know. And everything was in Japanese. The train station signs were in Japanese. You know, if I called a train to a job, for example, a modelling job, I had to set my alarm so that I knew when to get off the train at the station.
Yeah, I bet.
All the signs, nobody spoke English at that time. I went back more recently, and it's very different now. But it was incredible. I'd never had, you know, foreign food. I thought foreign food was frozen pizza. And now it's faced with sushi, raw fish, that was it.
From a vending machine.
From from the Derbyshire Dales to Tokyo.
Do you still have friends there then?
In Tokyo?
Yeah.
Not in Tokyo, but in Paris and a lot of places around the world. In New York, a lot of my friends who live there I'm still in touch with. Yeah, it was great.
So do you have plans to write then a third novel? Where do you write? I've got this image of you. Are you kind of upstairs?
I've got an office in the loft, and that's my time. It's like my little sanctuary. No one's allowed in. I shut the door, the kids are in bed, and it's
There's no
lovely.
glitter in there then?
There's no glitter. I'm just thinking where the disco balls hung. It's not in the loft, though. It's one of the only places where there's no glitter in our house.
Well, Tessa's new book,
I enjoy
It's Up to You, New York, is out now.
Yes. Now, in a moment, we'll be meeting British climber Daniel Hughes, who's just set a new record on the summit of Mount Everest.
Yes, but first, Larry Lamb has the story of a man who not only beat death, well, he did it in front of an audience night after night.
Until the night he didn't.
Chung Ling Soo, popular magician, master of the art of illusion, until the night he was killed on stage by a bullet from his own gun. At the time of the First World War, Soo had built a successful career as a variety theatre magician, playing to packed houses across London 6 nights a week. It was a traditional magic act, but spiced up with an exotic oriental theme.
He worked in front of a beautiful silk curtain emblazoned with the Chinese dragon. He produced live goldfish out of mid-air, and then he made his glamorous Chinese assistant disappear, only to reveal an enormous orange tree in her place.
But the stage character Chung Ling Soo was a total invention. In reality, he was plain old William Ellsworth Robinson, born in New York in 1861.
William Robinson was not a very successful magician in North America. He had a slightly awkward stage presence, he didn't sort of speak well on stage, and he was more of a success working for other magicians, creating tricks for them. But then it all kind of turned around when he saw a very successful magician in the US, and his name was Ching Ling Fu, and he was a genuine Chinese magician.
Robinson had an idea to borrow, or perhaps steal in some people's eyes, the act and persona of Ching Ling Fu, and then reinvent himself in Britain.
So, over he came as Chung Ling Soo, and billed himself as the original Chinese conjurer. He went to great detail. He wore authentic Chinese costumes, changed his hairstyle, and even adopted the language. Well, pretended to.
Well, he couldn't speak a word of Chinese, and he had a fake translator. So when he was, for example, being interviewed, interviewers would ask his translator questions in English. The translator would translate them in Chinese to Chung Ling Soo, who would murmur some gibberish back, and the translator would just invent an answer in English.
He didn't speak a word of Chinese?
He didn't speak a word of Chinese, no.
This is thought to be the only film record that exists of Chung Ling Soo. On stage, he was gaining a reputation for one particular trick, defying the bullets.
On Saturday 23rd of March 1918, here at what was then the Wood Green Empire, Chung Ling Soo was reaching the end of the second house. It was full as usual, and he was about to perform his bullet trick.
He would stand at one side of the stage and allow 2 real guns to be fired at him, loaded with bullets chosen and marked by 2 members of the audience.
Chung Ling Soo would attempt to catch the marked bullet in this plate, just as he's done before. He'd hold the plate directly in front of him, across his chest, and his 2 assistants would raise the muskets, take aim, and fire directly at him.
Chung Ling Soo fell to the ground. The audience fell silent. They didn't know if this was showmanship or part of the act, but the trick had gone wrong. A bullet had pierced Chung Ling Soo's lung, causing massive hemorrhaging. He was rushed to a nearby hospital but died the following day.
What's your theory about actually what happened?
Well, there are lots of rumours, there are some conspiracy theories, some people suggested it was suicide. He had a complicated life off stage, competitive relationships with his peers, with other magicians and inventors of magic. He married his assistant, and there were rumours of bigamy and possible polygamy. But it was a very dangerous trick, it was an inherently dangerous trick. Houdini actually begged him not to do it. It was famously known as the trick that scared Houdini, and Houdini wrote to William Robinson and said, please don't do this trick.
The setup for the guns was always done by Robinson himself. He was quite meticulous, but as the inquiry after his death showed, there was some corrosion in the gun, and as a result of the corrosion that was inside the barrel, the gun went off accidentally and fatally shot him.
Chung Ling Soo, or good old Bill Robinson, was buried at a private service in Barnes Cemetery on Saturday, March the 30th, 1918.
He kept the act up until the very end. Well, almost. As he fell to the floor that night, he was heard to cry out, "Oh my God, something's happened. Lower the curtain." The first, and indeed the last words in English ever spoken on the stage by Chung Ling Soo. His act was over.
Well, after that chilling story, we're back in the mountains with Daniel Hughes, who earlier this month was the first to make a video call from the top of Mount Everest.
This is the world's highest live video call. Never been done before. From the rooftop of the world, and I'm just panning around here. Hopefully it's not too windy. I've got to introduce my Sherpa here. I wouldn't be here without Tendi. He's been helping me for the last few days. The Sherpas, no one would get to the top of these mountains without them.
Yes! He's here!
Congratulations! It's nice to have you here. Now, in the past few weeks, though, 520 people have reached the summit. I mean, one person being an 80-year-old man, one was a one-legged woman. So some would say, is it easier these days? How did you find it? Would you do it again?
Well, my mission was to put the first red nose on top of Mount Everest, so I was absolutely focused on that, and I really need people to donate. I'm trying to get £1 for a million people. It's called the Everest Million campaign. everestmillion.com is where you need to go, so had to plug that, obviously. Yeah, it was very similar in many ways in that we were following the same footsteps. You're still in the same environment, the wind, the conditions, we're still on oxygen. In some ways it's easier because of the technology, but in many ways it's harder because actually when Hillary and Tenzing, they were absolute heroes, by the way, they were there, just two of them with a rope and some ice axes, whereas we were there in a queue and there's about 50 people ahead of me, and you're thinking, well, is the oxygen going to run out?
Yeah. This is some of your footage, isn't it, that I think that we're looking at here. So you didn't just take up the equipment to make that video call, you took a little camera.
Yeah, so I mean it was all done from a smartphone, a pole. I use a satellite modem, an Inmarsat satellite modem.
But there's no way to charge your batteries, is there?
No, so I was hauling loads of kit, like solar panels, batteries, keeping everything warm. Tundu helped me as well. He helped carry some of the stuff. So that's why it's never been done before, because actually most climbers, they want to carry as little as possible. And here I am with like an extra 10 kilos of kit to try and get this on top of Red Nose.
There's a lot of people taking a lot of stuff. I mean, some of the shots of the queues of people. It's
yeah.
I mean, look at that. A lot.
That's a pretty big queue. I think that might have been from last year. It wasn't quite as bad as that, but yeah, still on the day I summited, 140 people summited.
Well, listen, huge congratulations.
Huge
you got there. You got the red nose, and I'm sure red toes and red hands as well. But anyway, thanks for all of the photos that you've been sending in. If you've conquered your own Everests, this is Rachel Gorton from Rugby after she just climbed a knife edge ridge. There we go. Look, North Wales, brilliant.
And this is Charlie Kempton. She's 8 on top of Mount Snowdon.
Have a quick look at Ellen Garrett. Look at this, 16,500 feet. Look, in New Zealand, brilliant. There we are.
Yes, tomorrow the actress Celia Imrie will be here, and It's Up to You, New York is out now.
Cheers,
Thank you very much.
Good night. Bye-bye.
Bye.